Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am joining you from a beautiful community that I live in called Ravenwoods, which is on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Hamish?
Hi, everybody. Hamish Kamisa from Sparks Publishing Group, and I'm joining you from the beautiful Coquitlam First Nation territory, known as Coquitlam here as well.
Welcome to Purpose Connections. My name is Tessa Vanderkop. I'm a collaborator at Purpose Pathways, where our purpose is to empower leaders to change the world. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Canadian Purpose Economy Project, where our vision is that by 2030, 25% of businesses will be purpose-driven. I'm also here today with my lovely, beautiful friends, Hamish and Alex from Sparks Publishing Group. On Purpose Connections, which is a quarterly free online gathering of social purpose leaders, professionals, and advocates. We're super excited to be here today during the fifth Purpose in Business Week for our fifth webinar. So forget the four, we're now on five in the Purpose Connection series with our very special friend and guest, Dr. Victoria Hurth, to share insights on her newly published book, which launches officially, I think, did we say today? Uh,
Yes, today.
Entitled Beyond Profit, Purpose-Driven Leadership for a Wellbeing Economy, that has been co-authored with Ben Ramsey and Lorenzo Fioramonti.
And
And
Renshaw, I'm sure he won't mind it.
and that. And with that, I'd like to now introduce you to Alex.
And hi, everyone. I'm Alex Ninkatina. I'm a head of growth at Sparks, a full service purpose driven marketing agency based in Vancouver. At Sparks, we exist to amplify voices that catalyze positive change. We believe that marketing and communications can serve to accelerate awareness and adoption of solutions that promote long term well being for all. So that's why we're excited to once again work with Tessa to bring this fifth Purpose Connection session to life and to have Dr. Victoria Hurth back again on this really exciting day for everyone involved in advancing purpose-driven businesses. So a couple of housekeeping. You can find recordings of previous sessions on well-being economy, capital and purpose pragmatism, and AI and purpose through the link posted in the chat. Posted it just recently. I'll post it again. This session is being recorded. It will be distributed to registrants by email shortly after the session is completed. And if you have any questions, please submit them through Q&A section in Zoom or through the chat. And I'll hand it over to Hamish.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. This is really exciting to be doing this. I know that we had uh, almost a year to the day launched this last year. We had Victoria, Ben, and Lorenzo join us to talk about the book project, now officially the book. So this is a really wonderful milestone. And for those of you who haven't seen the previous webinar, I invite you to take a look at it. It's a great conversation that sort of gets into some of the motivations and some of the different corners of what brought that book into being. I don't want to take too much of today's talk with Victoria to shine a light on how it came to be, but I think it's important just to level set for some of you who don't know Victoria and the work that she and her colleagues and many of the others that she's engaged and collaborated with have brought together. It's an opportune time to kind of get everybody on the same page and see where the state of affairs is as it relates to purposes. Lots of stuff has been happening, and in particular since the last time we got a chance to speak like this. And then we'll transition into talking about the book itself and see if we can get a little bit more insight on some of the key themes that have made sort of the final cut, if you will, and we'll go and explore some of those corners. We only have an hour here, and I know as things go, when we all get a chance to speak with Victoria, we just want to shut up and listen to her talk for ages and ages. So I won't continue to ramble on here. So Victoria, maybe for everybody's benefit, a little bit of a background on yourself, and then if you could set sort of the frame for sort of where the landscape of purpose is today, and then we'll dive into some questions about the book.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Purpose in Business Week. Congratulations, celebrations, everybody. Great to see this happening again and coming out of Canada, where you have such a fantastic hubs of action and leadership. So I'm sure that everybody here obviously has an interest in purpose, and we probably have some deep experts in it. And everyone will have their different view of the field. Um, for me, having spent a very long time both trying to understand what's going on, but then also trying to help birth that, very much pracademic. That's what we do. I would say that we're at a brilliant moment, really. There was a point at which, I mean, every concept that comes into being is primed for being co-opted by the current system we have, because that's what a system does. A system that is coherent will reject a foreign body or it will make it its own, right? And so that's why time and time and time again we have concepts that get co-opted. It's always been great with purpose because the roots of purpose, which go beyond the dictionary definition of the point of something, just like sustainability goes way beyond something that just exists for a long time, right? So we have with purpose the roots of purposefulness. And I think that's what's meant that it's just not going to go away. That's one reason, because it has deep, deep philosophical roots as soon as you go on that track. The second thing that makes me feel that we're at this turning point in purpose is that we've kind of that tension between purpose that is serving the current system and being co-opted, that tension, there's been enough people who've held that space and said not just that it has deep philosophical roots, but purpose is the only concept. And that's why I got behind it once I understood it, because I'd been years on sustainability and how we make the world aligned with our well-being for a long, 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 long time. But when I came across purpose, I realized it's the first and still only concept that gets directly to the heart of the reason why we're in a mess. In other words, the profit maximization, self-interest motivation that we have embedded in our systems. And so for these reasons, and because enough people have been kind of holding that fire going, we're now at the point that we have enough clarity about how purpose operationalizes a future that we want, a good future for life on Earth, that then now we're sort of at the point where we're saying, right, guys, we're really clear now. This is what it is. This is what it looks like to govern for it. And therefore, this is what it looks like in practice. And the book, and most importantly, the ISO in purpose-driven organizations, which is the governance, the world's current consensus on how you ask and answer humanity's ultimate question. Big thing to say, but I totally stand by it, which is how do we govern so that our decisions drive and do not harm the good of the whole, long-term well-being for all. That puts the whole conversation around purpose into a different place. And the book is there in a way more than anything else as a strategy to help people be able to imagine this new future with such clarity that then when the ISO comes out, it's like, and here's the tool that I've been waiting for. So that's what I would say. I'd say we're at this moment where we can move far away from this tension with the very system that purpose addresses because we have enough clarity. Without that clarity, we can't unify. Without that unification, we can't bring our energy together, and we cannot have the courage as leaders to bring about this future that's waiting to be born.
Um, That's fascinating. As we were talking, my water cooler has decided to also celebrate Purpose in Business Week and wants to make its presence known in the group here.
I didn't hear anything,
Oh,
Hamish.
well, that's
Doing
great.
it
Well,
quiet.
it sort of this is probably like the reminder of like how can we have this conversation around a water cooler, which I think, the book will certainly serve as a talking point. So the water cooler, for those conversation spaces where we want purpose to be now something that people talk about, I think the book will be a really great way to start and spark that conversation. And I want to kind of rewind it a little bit back to the genesis of like why a book? Why write a book about purpose in this way? And I know that you're sort of representing three folks who came together to put this book in. So I want to sort of bring that and their voices into this conversation a little bit, like why and how. I know we talked a little bit of how you got together, but again, like reflecting after a year in a journey and all the work and all the back and forth, you probably had some moments of like, oh, why are we doing this? And reminding yourselves why you did do it. So why take on a project in the frame of a book from sort of the three of you?
Yeah, yes. And my co-authors, Ben Renshaw, who is a purpose coach of CEOs and C-suite globally, and Lorenzo Fioramonti, who has been really important in spearheading the well-being economy movement. He was an academic, but also a politician and working in that macro space, you might say, Ben in the micro space, and me across the spaces, but also specialized at that organizational level. And our book is about those three levels. So together, we provide the deep expertise as well as the bridging across to say that we don't have 5,000 different movements here. It's happening at all levels, trying to be born, and it needs to be born at all levels all at once. So the book was really, I can only tell this from my perspective, but my lifetime's work since I was really young was really trying to understand why are our decisions that adults then, are making misaligned with what is obviously in our best interests from what you tell me, from the stories I read, from the films I look at. It's like there is something really seriously going wrong here. And I followed that path. So I formally started that path in terms of studying in 1995 when I studied management sciences to try to understand, because I'd kind of figured out that, okay, organizations and businesses, but all organizations have something to do with this. Anyway, so then fast forward, and I'm not going to go through my life story. There are plenty of podcasts out there that do that, and a book, a chapter. But basically, it then got to the point that over 30 years since then, that point, testing and learning, as many conversations, as many bridge building opportunities as possible, both deep theory and practice. And then I got to the point where I was reaching saturation, which means that I was hearing the same things over and over again. And I had learnt to understand the code for when people in discipline X or sector Y or country X say something, that actually they mean the same thing as something over here, that for the uninitiated would look different. So that, and the 5 years of building the standard in governance and being in those thousands of conversations about what do we really mean, that's just one example, but enriched it. So when I ended up then, that was the case. I left my full-time academic work and I became full-time really showcasing this stuff and saying, if not this, what, guys? Because time is really seriously running out now. That was the point at which I started to think about a book. So as an academic, you're often asked to write books. And I was like, okay, this is not an ego project. I just don't want to just like tick a list, a thing that says, oh, I've written a book. So I held off and I published through Cambridge University Institute for Sustainability Leadership, for example, because I thought that was a better strategy for impact. But it got to the point where it was clear, and now I fully understand the need for a book. So I was having two conversations, one with Lorenzo, who I'd met like a year before, and it was clear how our work really joined together. And then Ben Renshaw approached me and said, I would love to go on a journey of writing a book with you. And I'd only just met him, but I'm like, yes, I can see that would really work. He's fantastic at what he does. And he writes to learn, which I think is just a fantastic approach. So then it was like, hang on a minute, there's not two books here. There's one book here and it needs to be born. And the reason is, and it still sort of has only really just dawned on me, how powerful the form of a book still is, because I've done podcasts and interviews and videos and TV and academic papers of varying lengths and magazines and whatever, right? But there's something different. There's something different about putting something, like synthesizing it and having it in potentially physical form that you can give to someone or you can get for people. So that's how it ended up. The world needed a forum for, I believe, leveling the landscape And like I say, maybe we've missed something. Maybe it's completely off track. Great. Let's have that debate. And then I'll work on the thing that's better, because as far as I can see, this is the logical way forward. And the book was just is there to facilitate. One last thing I'll say. I see it as a snowplow. This is my current way of talking about it, because there's so much great work out there. The book's there to help unify and solidify and clarify, but really to provide that snowplow effect. And the testimonials at the beginning, I think, do that more than anything, to say, clear the path for all the great work that we know is going on, but we need something that just opens that window so that the work can happen at more speed and clarity.
It's almost like putting your arms around all of these threads and ideas that can move us forward. Like literally, this is it. And it's so I think that's fantastic. It's been a year since you were here last. And a remarkable year it has been. We always talk about the rapid changes, the volatility. What do you think have been some of the most profound influences on purpose, either opportunities or barriers that you have seen in this last year since you were here?
The biggest driver of purpose, I think, is Trump, probably. And the reason that I say that is because, and it's not just Trump, it's Trump coming at a certain moment, and there's a maths equation in there somewhere, because people are desperate, and people who are desperate look to any option to get them out of the situation that they're in. Our system is at end game time. And we know that we as humanity have our toes over that cliff, as I often say. But what we have done is through cheap energy and fossil fuels, not just the issues of burning them, but the problem more important, I would say, what we do with the energy has created a sense of comfort and disconnect that is so profound that we just assume, oh, it'll get better. Someone has it in hand. It'll be all right. It takes someone like Trump to show us that it might not be, that this might not just be business as usual and another wave and another phase. And I hear some people talking about, yes, there are always phases. It's like, this is not a phase. And until we wake up, because ultimately we're plonked on planet Earth. That's one of the profound things that I realized a while ago, is that we're just plonked here, right? And we got to catch up. And we got a hell of a lot of catching up to do if you're plonked anywhere in our age range, because of the amount of stuff that had already been going on and the history of the Earth. We're like the final bit of the fingertip, but then so much has happened and it's speeded up so much. And so it's very hard to kind of, to wake up. I mean, I'm 49. I'm imagining everyone is around that sort of age, plus or minus. It's really hard to wake up. And if we think, even Trump, every leader has been born into logic one, the short-term financial self-interest system that we have deliberately put into our global governance systems. Not one leader exists that has not been born into that system. So it's this wake-up thing. And so I see that purpose feels radical until you realize that the alternative is badly managed decline through command and control, where we lose our freedoms, we lose our innovation. And so the conversation moves from being, do we, anti-capital, we're against capitalism, but are we really? Are we actually just against a market that is governed in the utterly the opposite way that it needs to be, that's leading to the opposite of its goal? What is genuinely the alternative? Because if the alternative is command and control, either extreme left or extreme right, who really wants this? I know I don't. I know that I would like to have the freedom to exchange, but I know that that's not possible unless we govern the economy for what it is. So there's this juncture point, and I think Trump has let people know that you either have to fight for what you care about, or it literally could go, and everything else. So that's, yeah. And I know it comes at a great cost. I'm not denying the cost that he brings, but the cost that's happening under the surface through the apathy of just tweaking a system, even if it feels radical, it's like, oh wow, look at all the crazy stuff that we're doing. It's like nowhere near as big as we need it to be. And so yeah, the book is there to help put that to as a mirror and hold that mirror and say, we make our choices. Let's get the facts on the table and make our choices.
I think it's so interesting that you say that there's this comfort in sort of the system that has been created, that at its endpoint, which is what Trump has helped make us see, that it's a system that has been created. And I remember that was like a real wake up call for me actually last year when you were all on talking about the idea of the book, and that we built it and we have to unbuild it and rebuild it. And once you realize that, I think you have that system of, okay, so, and we talked about this last time, what is the exit ramp? And so, yeah, anyways, just my reflections on that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's part of this being plonked on planet Earth thing, right? We just think it's the way it is. My son, when he was 12, said, well, obviously the purpose of business is to make as much money as possible. And by default, let's continue that and say, yeah, and the purpose of the government is to make GDP, and the purpose of universities is to get research income and student headcounts. I mean, this is what we have come to live by. And even though you will ask people and they'll say, no, of course, that's not the reason. When we look at the governance system, that's exactly what's happening. So myself and other colleagues had done a special issue on repurposing universities for sustainable human progress, for example. And whilst university will say, oh, obviously we're purpose driven, and we would like to think that they are, when you look at the decision making through the governance systems, you realize, and anyone who's operated in a university will realize, that what really gets the thumbs up and what really goes ultimately comes down to self-interest, and usually financial self-interest. So this is something that is so profound, but I think we've really lacked the ability to move forward because there's been very little focus, I feel, of those in this field around decision making, organizational decision making, what unifies that, and therefore the role of governance. But when we think that we didn't have a fundamental consensus on what governance of an organization was until ISO 37000 was launched in 2021, and it took 5 years to build, why would we be able to talk confidently? We could say, yeah, but that's corporate governance. Yeah, but that's charity governance in Southeast Asia. And, it's like, no, there's one fundamental thing. All governance systems are governed, and we can apply that to every level of the system. And unless we can, we are governing, but we are by default governing by short-term self-interest, because that is the system that's been put in place. And while we don't own that agenda, there are certain people who with power that can co-opt that agenda. So, and we shouldn't be surprised. So this is the key message actually in the book. We need to get literate about purpose and governance, those two things together. Without that base literacy, and we could start now from everybody. This is not let's start with children, or no, this is everybody. Until we get literate in those two things, we're just tweaking the edges still, even if it feels radical.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect pickup point on, just a bit of a human angle on this, where, you talk about universities, these are systems that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? They have deeply embedded cultures and ways of becoming. Uh, the systems that currently exist, and you put a really great point on it, where like most of the leaders, if not all of the leaders, have been born into this system. Clearly there are people who benefit from it, right? There are people who would rather things stay the way that they are because they stand to benefit the most. And so there's sort of a tension point for me, which is, how do we explain what is better than the status quo, or how does purpose, offer that? And, how does the system, how are you hearing the system sort of respond to these overtures or these new sort of concepts? Like, walk us through what feels a little bit like the tension there.
But this is where I am fundamentally utterly inclusive in this agenda because I I genuinely feel we all, now I say all, there are many people who don't benefit. In fact, we all don't benefit from the system ultimately, right? But many of us feel like we benefit. And we are loss averse and we have a fear-based system, all the worst possible things that we have. So I think most people feel like they have something to lose. Even all of us here that really understand it, it still feels scary, but it should do because we're going into the unknown and we're taking a bigger leap than we normally would have to. So two things are required. And it comes back down ultimately to carrot and stick. There's a reason that those two things are important, right? Now, we know that fear is, even though we've institutionalized fear in our whole systems, that is the major foundation of our motivational system that we put in place. But we know, but it's not fear, it's more a reality check, right? So there's fear, and then there's the being compelled to move forward. And it really has to be said, I think until people really understand the breakdown of the social and environmental systems, really understand, then it's very easy if your life feels generally okay, right? And we're very adaptive people, so we might not even realize that all of the mental health issues that are sitting under the surface. But let's just say that unless you see that even that is under threat massively, and you can see that it might be under threat forever, then it's very, very difficult to have that like fire under your bum. And I think that is number one, because to me, when I speak to people, it's one of the biggest markers. I spoke to somebody the other day at an event and they said, yeah, but life's never been better. You know, it's the Hans Rosling thing on steroids, right? Life's never been better. And we see it everywhere. We see this because actually that is the biggest queller of action because it's like the system's working fine, right? So you have to know that the system isn't working fine and you have to face that data and you have to look at it. But then secondly, you need that motivation. So to your point, Hamish, about, people feeling like something that they're not stuck, because fear can stick you unless that compels you to somewhere else. And that comes back to the point of the book, because we have got lots of ideas, but it's very hard for people unless we have key tools that we can really see. Two things. We can really imagine what this might look like. And because we can see how it can be done, then we're sort of stuck. It sounds nice, but then we kind of doubt. And that's where I think we're at this divide now, because the book and absolutely the ISO will quell the fears of the unknown, plus greater understanding about what will happen if we don't, that I think we have this tipping point that is, I think many people are feeling it underplay right at this moment, but we need some catalysts, and I hope that these two things are part of it.
Tessa, maybe turn over to you to talk a little bit more about scaffolding.
So, if this book is, providing, it sounds like the scaffolding or the architecture to the exit ramp, so to speak. I loved it when you actually used that in our talk last time. So an exit ramp with the scaffolding, for an economy that puts well-being for all as the animating goal. Like, how do you want people in this room to use this book in all of its different sort of elements on the macro and the micro levels? Like, how do you want them to use this? I feel like, in a sense, this book is also a connection point and a hive around people to bring people together, so that they're not really helping to build this future on their own, which is scary, right? I'm wondering if you could just sort of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that the economy is a critical part of the book, but it isn't the point of the book. And I think it's really important to go one level. We need to go one level deeper. And that's why the purpose-driven bit is so important. The economy is a tool. It's a tool of government. We, as citizens, we're citizens of planet Earth, first and foremost. We're then allocated to a nation, sometimes more than one. We become citizens of that. We delegate to governments to govern on our behalf. Even in dictatorships, we're benignly letting them, because we could overthrow if we wanted. So we are essentially delegating. And those governments have tools. And one of the key tools that they have, the key tool, is the economy. Because the economy takes resources and transforms and allocates them for our collective well-being. So it is a core tool, but this is not about the economy. And we're not going to just get a well-being economy. It's about the intent. And purpose-driven intent, in other words, purpose-driven governments, which we would think is their intent, because it's actually their mandate to provide long-term well-being for their citizens. So we would hope that it was. And the problem is, of course, the problem with the theory of change at the heart of the current system, right? So we need to have purpose-driven government who will use the economy as a tool to achieve well-being. So that's the order we need to, and the book is really clear on that so that we can get that. So then in terms of how, the book takes those 3 levels, and what it says is we do not have the luxury, and we probably never had the luxury, even with more time, of being able to say, well, I'm going to do this bit. It's like, I'll do my recycling, or I'll do the bit at my personal level. It's saying, firstly, we need to be thinking in terms of what is the full power we can bring to this. And when you're purpose driven, of course, you step into that full power and that full ability to see the system and to do courageous things that you wouldn't do for yourself. We know this is just fact. So that's the personal level, which is the really ultimately what it comes down to, is our energy as individuals. So the book and that really sits in Ben Renshaw's key domain, and that is a lot of practical advice around how to do purpose-driven leadership. His expertise very much in an executive context, and that's one thing to say about the book. This book is for everybody in the world. It's about leaders at all levels, everywhere. In doing that, we had to choose language that would kind of cast the net as large as possible, which means everyone's going to hate it in some way or another because it's not made for them, it's made for everyone, right? And I'm okay with that, as long as people can kind of like see beneath maybe don't try not to worry too much about the plate it's served up on, is what I'd like to say. It's about what's the messages that are sitting underneath. So that section is very much about unleashing that in yourself, in your teams, etc., etc. The organizational level then is very much about moving from financial self-interest, traditional organization, business, charity, government, whatever, university, to being purpose-driven. And there are key tools in there. There is I give an overview. We give an overview of ISO 37000, an overview of the standard, the British standard, and the forthcoming one in that I've talked about, ISO 3711, the ISO in purpose-driven organizations, to give a sense of the key fundamentals there. And also marketing, which is an absolutely key tool, as you said, Alexandra, for being able to manifest in reality, in creative relationship between the organization and individuals. And then at the macro level, revealing the shift from GDP to GDP focused to well-being outcome focused. But then that's a holding space to say, and to do that, the governments need to be purpose-driven, and governments are organizations. So go and look at chapter 2 for that. So this is, and what we say is, we have to step into our power, do what we can within our sphere of influence, understand that fully, expand that fully, at the same time as trying to influence our organizations about their governance, which means skilling ourselves up on what it means to govern and how we can influence that. And where we cannot do something, and this is true for anyone, anywhere in the system, right? Everyone is surrounded by parts of the system that will restrict them. That's just a fact of life. Everyone feels stuck and no one feels like they have enough power. That's just a given, right? So what matters is do what it is you can in your full power, and then connect with others to influence other parts of the system that are outside of your direct sphere, but which you can influence with a different strategy or with collaboration. So we need to be lobbying at the international and the national level for a shift to a well-being economy. We need to be actively working within the organizations that we have some power in. And that's not just those we work for, that's those that we consume from, buy from, those that we are engaged with, our community groups, our churches, all of these things are organizations that we can influence their governance, starting very powerfully with government. And when we have ISO 3711, that is a key tool to go, oh, you're supposed to be purpose driven. How are you doing on this part of accountability, for example? And then of course, governing ourselves, because those principles of governance, which are direction, oversight of that direction and accountability for it, if we sit there and really contemplate what it means to govern ourselves, that is the basis of any religion, any self-help things are to say, who's the person you want to be? So how now are you going to direct yourself so you become that person, so that your goals aligned with your purpose, but you do not, and this is the two parts of direction, your what you're trying to achieve and within what parameters. Have you got those right parameters in place? Are you overseeing to make sure you're on track to what you want to achieve or change that direction? And are you accountable to yourself and to others for the commitments that you've made? It's the same stuff at every single level of the system. So that's my great hope, that we learn in the most practical way, that we learn the foundations of governance so that we can become powerful governors of a purpose-driven future. In other words, a future of long-term well-being for all.
I liked how you talked about those three different levels. And I think it's interesting, and what I'm hearing is everyone, everywhere, all at once. And my theory is that one single person can't do it all, but we can all be actors within what I call our hug zone, right? There are things that we can all do. And so it sounds like this book is a bit of a roadmap to how we're able to, locate that, I think, in a way. So
it is. And it's also there to be, like I say, inclusive at the biggest possible sense, because the reason, and anyone who's heard me present will have heard me talking about this, but it's in the book there in detail as well. Long-term well-being for all. What the pillars of sustainability are there to support, the mandate of government, the goal of the economy. And if we ask enough why something is important, we get there. That is transformative. And it's what's at the heart of the standards in purpose. Because once we know what is this ultimate value that we care about, the elephant in the room, really, the thing that is so intuitive, we've forgotten it's even there and therefore are destroying it. That, by putting that there, it means that, and this is what ISO 3711 does, it says, well, let's say, what would you need to be asking as a governing body and doing if you were going to govern to, at a minimum, make sure that what you were trying to achieve drove long-term well-being for all, and that your parameters, at a minimum, meant that you're not harming long-term well-being for all. That's basically the ESG agenda, right? But it's only one part of the equation. What would that look like? By doing that, you're essentially getting the most inclusive frame. And that's why in the book we have some wonderful testimonials from Indigenous leaders, because this is if we go to Indigenous wisdom, if we go to the roots of philosophy, any philosophy that's focused on doing good, which are 99% of them, obviously there's hedonism and stuff, but those that are focused on doing good, which then overlaps with religion, not in the structure, but not religion, spirituality. Ultimately, it's everywhere. And all that the book and the ISO are doing is saying, well, if that's what matters, we need to govern for it because otherwise it's not going to happen. And now we're at end game time. And there's a deep, deep wisdom in that, right? Because if parts, are serving themselves without consideration of the whole is ultimately going to fail and we're going to fail with it. You could say that. A child would understand this. And we know it's true. We're just so deep, as they say, down the rabbit hole. So this is nothing more complicated than saying we're in fog we've created ourselves within this tiny box, which we now call reality because we're born into it. Actually, it's really quite simple if we go outside of this box, but we have to be able to name the box, say we don't want it, and move outside of this space where real logic. And I'm a practicing Stoic, so I'm going to bring this in here because it is really deeply important. It's a philosophy. It's not a religion, but I believe all the religions that I've encountered say ultimately the same thing, is that nature has true wisdom in it. I mean, Stoics particularly say this, obviously, but true wisdom in it. If we think about the Adam and Eve story, right? There was a point at which we disconnected and we were able to make conscious choices that we were just intuitively, let's call it this way, we were intuitively governing ourselves to be aligned with the whole. Then we gained a consciousness which we were so enthralled with that we were able to choose to make our lives more comfortable now. And therefore, we basically chose to put dysfunctional governance systems into our system, but we didn't even have the language to call it governance. So just at the point at which we kind of go, is the point at which it's almost too late. There's a beautiful, like I say, there's a maths equation in there somewhere, right? And now we have to learn. We can't just let that governance go. Firstly, you can't. Every system's governed. But secondly, because by default, it's gonna kill us, right? So we're going to have to hold it and move it. And then hopefully we'll become so deep in our cultures, in our wisdom, that hundreds of years from now, we won't even need to call it governance again, as long as we don't become complacent, because we're not going to lose this consciousness that we have. So they're taking it out to the biggest possible frame. But I want to say that because the reason I feel that I reached saturation point is because I reached that solid foundation, which when you look for it, it's everywhere. And that is the basis on which, as leaders, we can be confident to move forward. Because it's not like, this is, Victoria or Ben or Lorenzo's thing. It's not. I feel this is just what we all intuitively know, but pulling it together has taken me personally 30 to 40 years of concerted effort. We don't have time for everyone to go through that process. Everyone has their role to play. I have a role to play. And for me, this is it. And my colleagues together, our role is to help leapfrog people so they don't have to spend 4 decades working out.
I just see something in the chat here that I'm going to read out to you, and you can address Victoria. It's from Paul. Your objectives are right on, but capital and power are now so concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, and fewer oligarchs, that they will use all of their financial and political power to hit back, suppress, and worse. How do you prepare for that? Need popular movements that transform the system. Not easy. Keeping people active with a goal and perspective is critical, but it has to be realistic as well. How?
Yeah. Yes, that's a great point. And I was watching my boy, my son is studying for his exam in Vietnam War, and there's a Netflix series on called Turning Point about the Vietnam War, and it just reminded me. We think about those assassinations that all happened all at once. JFK, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King, all clear leaders who stood up and were able to say something and gain power, and what happened to them all, right? Sure. Totally agree. And that's why, and even without that, this cannot be about a leader. Like you said in that question, very, very accurately, Paul. It cannot be about a leader. And that's why, personally, I've taken the strategy that I have. Because I want to shadow myself in this. Because firstly, it's not about me. I'm holding up a mirror to what everyone else is saying. I'm like a spokesperson. And the book that all 3 of us wrote is like being a spokesperson and just saying, hey guys, we think we're doing this, are we? But the other most important thing is the ISO. And I'll say it again. The reason why I've spent about 15 years in standards building and in ISO, which is a collection of 174 national standards bodies based in 174 countries that come together to basically form consensus on any topic. So the fact that we have the ISO in governance and we're nearing the end of the one in purpose-driven organizations, I hope you're probably already there in the logic here, is that is a space that is arm's length from government, because pretty much all those standards bodies are, but is not government, has broader participation, is multi-stakeholder, with limits, but as much, there is no other system globally that I can see will provide a forum where we can have exactly what you're saying, Paul, where people can come together and they can, in a stakeholder, democratic, it has very strict processes that have been formed over decades, come together and say, this is what we think should happen. And because it's not law, it also has that sort of soft power. Now, it's relied on to create law, but that's my theory of change anyway. because I can't see any better approach for doing that. And that's why the ISO is way more important than most people realize. It is actually a party for the world to come to decide and redesign the mechanics of moving from this system. If that is adopted and understood, along with the book doing the kind of, oh, what does this mean and why it's important, the stuff I'm saying now, then we have the basis of a ground up movement whose momentum will be really hard to stop, I hope.
And there's another question in the chat from Eliana. And could you talk a little bit about the UK Social Value Act and how it relates to the ISO 37000? And also, do you think that the UK Social Value Act is useful as a tool for operationalizing social purpose?
Okay, so for those of you that don't know the UK Social Value Act, it is now I was deep in that, but probably about 18, it feels like 18 years ago, maybe it was about 12. When did it come out? Maybe 2007, 8, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, the point is that it's basically a way of binding government procurement to social value. Who are we talking? Iliana, have I misconstrued? Is it been updated since I last looked, or is that right? 2012. Okay. And updated since. Okay. So Eliana, you jump in if I get any of this wrong. But essentially it's for saying, okay, it's basically that recognition. Oh, hang on a minute. Mandate of all governments, as the International Accounting Standards Board make really clear, is to serve the well-being of all citizens and other entities, right? Oh, well, shouldn't this mean that, they need to kind of justify the social value, at least starting with maybe their procurement, right? So there we have it in there, and there's a criteria when you put out for tender that you need to be aligned. So I would say, so when you say ISO 37000, that's the standard in governance. But are you meaning 3711 in purpose-driven organizations, which kind of takes that? It's compatible 37,000, but it takes it to another level. Unless you say otherwise, I'm going to assume that you're talking about 3711. Basically, think about that like at a whole system level. So this isn't government just being told, oh, you have to make sure that you don't destroy the very thing that you are mandated to do through your procurement processes. It's saying you in total should be governed for this. You need to be accountable for the long-term well-being of everyone in that country in relation to the long-term well-being for everyone on planet Earth, which we in the UK are anchored to. And it's a whole system, governance system. And if we don't have that, of any organization, essentially we're saying it's okay if that organization asset strips, either asset strips collective long-term well-being for all, or has access to resources that it uses to get its own self-gain, but is totally forfeiting the potential for innovation that could do good, right? Now, if we're okay with that, that's okay. But we have to make those decisions and we have to have them on the table. If we say, well, for a transition period, but we need to be doing the maths, you might say, to say this makes sense, right? So I would say the Social Value Act and others like it and all the ESG agenda, a little like biting at the edges to tweak a broken system. 3711 is for us to be able to envisage as the system that doesn't yet exist, that is complete in its alignment and accountability to collective long-term well-being. And then the question is, how do we move our system there? But we can see the whole and not just try and dig away. And on that note, just also to say, when Trump and Milei and others turn around and say, we've got the answer, we've got the exit door, as you say, they say that because they say, and everyone else is like, basically the establishment, and they're like dragging you down and taking your money and you want to keep everything as it is so they can line their pockets, right? You can see why they have grounds to say that. Not because it's necessarily true, but because if we are literally just tweaking a broken system that is so harmful to us, then are we not almost propping it up? And so I would say sometimes, and many other people have said this before, by merely tweaking a system, we're almost saying, well, it'll be okay if we just do this. We need to go a few layers out. And that's the bit that's hard to do, but that's what the book is there for.
I want to just sort of recognize that we've been as close to feeling like traveling at light speed as I think we can humanly get, because I can't believe we're almost at the top of the hour. But as these conversations with Victoria typically go, we will not have nearly enough time to get into some interesting things. I know we will probably want to wrap up soon. I want to maybe ask that we touch on very briefly, maybe like a minute, talking about the innovation agenda and moving there. I know not a lot of time, but maybe if you could kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
sprinkle a little bit onto that.
And maybe before I do that, I want to say this for posterity.
Posterity, yeah.
Posterity, right?
Yeah.
Because to the question that was said before, and we were talking about all those assassinations and stuff, I have to tell you that this is why this day is really special for me, because ultimately my whole life, I would say, has been leading. These are strategies. So my whole life is not leading to this. My whole life is to support us aligning with long-term well-being for all people and planet. But the book and the ISO are key things that I've put my energy into as strategies. And I did them, I put my energy there because I didn't see that it was happening otherwise. So I felt compelled to do it. But now, especially today, because the book is out there, and even though it's launched in the US on the 30th, in March, sorry, you can download the ebook wherever you are in the world. And the reason I say this is because if I get assassinated, honestly, if I do, then I've failed already because I'm not the important thing in this, right? It's the world movement. They're not going to be able to. But anyway, I think they'd be stupid to, because I think if they did, it would draw more attention to it all. So I just want to say I'm okay if that happens, because this is now in the world, right? And if they do, it will draw attention to it. And if I do get assassinated, I'm really, that makes it sound like I've got my head way above where it is. And I only say this just in case actually people take it seriously, as they absolutely should. Then please, make the most of the situation. Innovation, 30 seconds, is to say that that purpose, the main thing that we're losing out on, yes, it's the doing no harm, but organizations exist to drive forward well-being, to organize us so that we are doing the best thing with the resources available to drive our well-being. If we harm those in the process, that's ridiculous, because we're also harming the well-being, at the end. So it really matters. And while planetary boundaries and donor economics and all of these and the SDGs, they're really talking about the do no harm. We have to unleash the innovation. We have the mother of all innovation crises, and organizations were never there just to asset strip from people or strip stuff for themselves. They were supposed to, we let them exist for this reason. So if we want to get out of this, we need purpose, because unless we have purpose driving the innovation, then we're lost. And that's why it's a fundamental requirement, and why long-term self-interest is just not going to cut it.
All right. I think, Tessa, maybe you want to round us out. And if there's, I don't know if we'll have time to squeak in any last minute questions, but we will commit to getting those questions out into the world.
Can I say one last thing?
Of
I'll
course,
make it really short. Is to say that the really important thing, the pushback that people might get are from those liberal economists and liberal-minded people who fear the alternative from the free market that we have. The message that I would have is a system that's killing us can't persist. A system that is free to kill us was never good in the first place. The only chance we have to really have the freedom, the democratic, the efficiency, and the freedom effects of a market economy is to govern it for its goal, which is long-term well-being for all. That's what we buy into. That's economics 101. So let's just let it be efficient and effective, not go via money to get to well-being. We go straight to well-being. We govern it for that. Money is always a means to an end. We unleash the innovation, because the alternative is that loss of freedom. So I believe that this is this is the way that we can harness and retain the freedoms of the liberal market.
Just one last comment in the box in our chat from Michael that says, food for thought, a genuine purpose economy will only emerge when organizations and individuals align on their sense of purpose and activate it through high performing teams. I think that's one part of it, but I think there's so many other complex part of it, as we talked about earlier, those different levels from, purpose. We need purpose-led government as the big bucket.
But Michael's right. It starts,
Yeah.
ultimately in an inert system and in any system, it comes down to different energy. And that comes from with us. And it starts with us. And then it emanates out. So start with you, but you can have purpose, but if it's not informed purpose, then where will it go? So you need to do the work at all the different levels, and see that bigger picture.
I have a question, but I feel like at 2 minutes too that I probably shouldn't be opening up a whole other level of discussion. And that is, what are the bright lights on all those different sorts of levels that you were talking about earlier, those different buckets like leadership and governance and purpose-led government? Are you seeing anything that hopeful? And aside from that, if I don't get a chance, thank you for coming.
I would say that the another major reason for the book is to say, hey guys, this is underway everywhere. We provide a thin, high-level sliver of the work that we know is happening at the individual, organizational, and macro level. So if nothing else, and please also, when you get the book, please spend time reading those testimonials, because them in themselves, believe, are the kind of wake up call that diverse stakeholders and some of those unusual suspects you might see that this is the problem and therefore the solution and the path forward. And this is really powerful. So this is not, oh, here's this new idea. It's like, here's this idea already under play, despite the fact that we're in fog and we're stuck in this system. It's still trying to be born. And even though, people always ask me for examples of purpose-driven organizations, I'm like, actually, I can list a large number. But my God, seeing as everything is loaded against them, we're lucky that any exist, right? But let's imagine if we actually enabled them, because they are just waiting to be born. So I think this is the sort of thing that we really need in droves. And I hope that the book unleashes that. And I just really ask all of you to take what you can from it, put it into your own language for your own people, own it, move it. I don't know what the book publishers will probably say and it's something else, but there's a lot of stuff that I've published outside of that, or things. Just use it, make it your own. It doesn't need to be cited in terms of anything that I own. This is for all of us. This really, truly is. We are all the leaders that we need in the world, and they're all out there just waiting to be born and activated.
Thank you so much, Victoria.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Sorry, I have to say this one thing because of
okay,
the
go
Canadians
ahead.
in the room. When you see a snowplow, think purpose. I think you've just got 85% of Canadians on board.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and letting me mark this special occasion. I'm going out now for a meal with my son and my husband, who I still don't think quite understand what it's all about. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining me in this.
Thanks everyone for coming today.
Thanks,
and to Ben and Lorenzo, sorry that you couldn't be here, but I hope that I've done the book justice.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.